Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. The Ukraine War news update. First part thereof for the 22nd of August 2024. And my goodness, there's so much happening all the time at the moment. And I don't want my videos to be long, but it would be nice if Ukraine and Russia could get together and just take a day off and say, do you know what? Let's let JP have a short video on how his tomatoes have been getting on in his neighbour's greenhouse. And just, you know, some kind of random update on nice things. But no, the war is raging and both sides are going at it hammer and tongs. So we will start, as we normally do, Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, or the usual caveats apply. And we'll start with 1,130 personnel lost. That is in the middle of the range that we have seen of late. It's incredibly high, above 1,000. Of course, it's insanely high. 7 tanks, which is just below daily average for that category. 25 troop carrying AFVs, which is above the daily average. 46 artillery systems, lower than we've seen the last couple of days, but still over twice the daily average. 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems, very useful if they are indeed high value pieces of kit. Interesting to note that the drones are right up at 96 there, and 1 cruise missile. I don't often talk about drones because there's usually a big lag between the stats and what happened, because the stats get compiled in the middle of the night, my time, or indeed Ukrainian time, and I think there's often attacks that are ongoing, and also it includes, I think, things like reconnaissance drones, sometimes Lancet drones. There is a bit of an unknown there with drones, so I generally ignore these categories. But it's worth noting that it's particularly high there. And there was a huge attack, not last night, but the night before. 59 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 17 pieces of special equipment, so fairly high in that category. Now we're going to pop into Dell's statistics. Remember, they are always linked in, and they are open source, linked in the description to my videos below. And he does an amazing job at this. Lives locally to me, and I went out with a lovely beer with him earlier on in the summer. And in fact, he's just contacted me today to say, welcome back to the dull grey Hampshire coast we love so much as home. Yes, it's dull, it's grey, and it's windy. Brilliant summer. I have a couple of record moving 7-day highs to report. So drones, as we just talked about, are now at a 7-day high, 57.4 average. Special equipment, 13 average over the last 7 days. So that's a 7-day high. Drones also second highest daily attack, 96. The highest was 115, so that attack from 2 nights ago, leaving its mark. But where are the missiles to accompany the swarms of drones? And this is something I've often said, that the Russians, they would if they could, they answer, they can't. I don't think they just have the missile capacity anymore. Just 15 missiles in the same 7-day period. Wow. I'm still guessing they don't have any missiles to spare anymore, or are stockpiling. And if they're stockpiling, it does mean it means they don't have them to fire and to stockpile. So this still means they don't have enough. And he says, are you fixed for a swift one? Are we going for a drink on Friday with also Simon, another local? So, hey, ATP crew getting together. Anyway, yes, I am, Dell. I'm up for it, and I'll pick you up if needs be. Okay, right. So none of you need to know that, though. I am going to fly to the heavens that I don't really believe in. And there we go. Okay, so this is showing the personnel losses, and you can see that the personnel losses are significant and getting more significant. So that over 1,000 a day on a consistent basis, like every day appears to be over 1,000, is packing these orange lines into causing a steeper blue line to go up there. So the Russians are losing a lot of personnel. We are seeing heavy losses in some of those categories I've just mentioned. Things like special equipment, for example, showing themselves to be lost at a very high rate, and that's probably because more excavators and things like that are being targeted by the Ukrainians. There are lots of recovery vehicles we often see on there, so that blue line becoming steeper, the gradient being steeper, shows that they are packing more losses in, and that you can see from these orange lines there. The trend line is rolling upwards for special equipment, so on and so forth. Go and check this open source data out. It's really really interesting to peruse. Now, this is based on the general staff figures, of course, so, you know, pinch of salt and all that I always say. But I think this is a very useful bit of data presentation that Dell has given us, and he gives all the raw data on the first of the sheets there, and where the numbers are shaded with darker red. The darker red means that is a worse day for the Ukrainians based on the figures up to that point. So you can see, so today's date, 22nd of August, we have a fairly bad personnel figure, a fairly bad artillery loss, very bad, it's even darker red, drone loss, fairly bad vehicles and fuel tanks, and special equipment is even worse. So it gives you an idea there. And then to the right of that on the data sheet, first of all, you have the daily infographic that I've just shown you. That's today's one, will always be there. And then you get all the averages. You get a mean, average, median, and mode, record daily high for that category, and a 7-day and 30-day moving averages. So really good stuff from Dell, and thanks for reaching out, mate. We're going to talk stats not tonight, tomorrow night. So whoop-de-whoop. Okay, Andrew Perpetua says, and this is in answer, and by the way, he's got no figures out yet that I can see, but he does say something in answer to some videos coming out of Ukrainians getting killed in Kursk. And these are being really highlighted by the Russian propagandists, really, the Russian Telegram channels and Twitter handles, etc., etc. And he says Russians post their footage of Ukrainian casualties in Kursk like it's lol gotcha moment, when in reality the footage is just bog standard and happens endlessly to Russian troops all over Donetsk. Propaganda only works on people who don't understand how the war is fought. Honestly, some of the takeaways from the Ukrainian casualties in Kursk are things like Ukrainians take care of the wounded, Ukrainians help each other evac, Russians 99 times out of 100 run away and leave the wounded to die. Most of the time, Russian vehicles don't wait around to let the wounded in before driving away. So basically, from the Russian, like, look at these Ukrainians in trouble videos that are coming out, they're actually showing that Ukrainians are looking after their wounded. And when you look at the Russian equivalents, they don't do that. And the Russians often drive away while people are trying to get into the vehicles. And Andrew knows this because he sees something like 180 videos a day that he's checking out, him and his team, to do geolocations and to tot up the stats. Those are really what I see in the footage. Otherwise, it's all pretty standard. It doesn't depict higher casualties than expected. It isn't more gory or whatever than any other area. It is pretty standard stuff meant to appear like Ukraine is losing. But the reality is Ukraine is doing an incredible job up in Kursk. Now, of course, there are questions as to whether it is all worthwhile, and you know they're losing on the Pokrovsk direction, or in the Pokrovsk direction. Just seeing if he's updated his stats. No, he hasn't. So yeah, you've got to understand it in the context that it exists in. But in Kursk, they are doing a pretty solid job. The Ukrainians. The question is, you know, always where next? What do they do with the gains that they've made? Right. In terms of personnel losses, and that 1,130 that we have seen, there are still a large number of prisoners being taken every single day. Here's another group, says Tendar, of Russian soldiers in Kursk going into captivity. Judging from the badges, it was another group of Kadyrov's Akhmat TikTok brigade. So these are, and then we've got Aptia Laudonov, the leader of that group, or the Akhmat, saying that they are holding the Ukrainians wherever the Akhmat are, and saying that the Ukrainians are being repelled, etc., etc., etc. And yet videos are coming out of Akhmat being captured, and it's not going too well for them. So, you know, who do you believe, the raw visual evidence or Aptia Laudonov speaking on camera? And there are plenty more videos of captured Russians. They're all over the shop in Kursk. They are losing a number of particularly conscripts in that area, not just conscripts though, and that will possibly hurt the Russians in terms of PR and help the Ukrainians in terms of exchange funds and getting back some of maybe their Azov fighters, bearing in mind that some of about 20 odd Azov fighters have just been condemned to 20, I think it's 4 years, or is it 24 of them being condemned to 25 years, something like that, 25 of them being condemned to 24 years in prison for just being members of Azov, basically, is really what's going on there. So it'd be nice for the Ukrainians to get them back. Anyway, talking about Russian losses, so many Russian soldiers, says Chris Owicki, have been killed in the Irkutsk region that the local authorities have run out of money to transport them back to their relatives. Local people are now having to crowdfund for body bags and the transportation of corpses. Russia's Ministry of Defense transports the bodies of dead soldiers free of charge to airfields capable of handling military transport planes. However, these may be hundreds of kilometres from where the relatives live, necessitating the use of ground transportation as well. The responsibility of doing this originally lay with the regional authorities, but was transferred to municipalities earlier in 2024. The cost was covered in the Irkutsk region by the Zvezda Fund, but this has passed to municipal educational funds, which have run out of money. Relatives and local activists are appealing for donations in the social media group for the city of Ust-Kut, 300 kilometers from the nearest military airfield in Bratsk. People in the Kerensky district, a similar distance from Bratsk, are also appealing for help. According to the head of the Continent Educational Fund, at least 63 people from the Irkutsk region have died in the Ukraine war, 41 of them in this year alone. Other relatives are appealing for money to send body bags to the front so that the dead can be recovered. The wife of the mobilized soldier wrote that she was, quote, appealing for help, not for judgment. She explained that the money for bags was being asked for by the military who was lifting bodies. It appears that the Russian MOD is providing little help in recovering the dead. And of course, we've heard plenty of times that the Russians are not recovering the dead on the front lines because the commanders don't want the stats. They don't want to have to make a report to their superiors that they have lost those people. So they'd much rather just report them as missing, or not report them at all. What are your lost stats? Well, we've lost these. And they don't say that actually, 4 times as many are just missing. So we don't have to put them in the stats. And then we also don't have to pay compensation to those families and arrange the costly process of repatriating the dead bodies. If we just leave them out on the fields to rot, then happy days. And remember, I showed you, or at least I referenced because I couldn't really show it to you, a vehicle driving down a road with loads of body bags in and someone in the back pushing them out of the SUV to just fall on the ground. So they were just dropping dead bodies along this road, and that's visual evidence of the Russians doing that. So we know this happens. They are not. The point being is that whenever you hear about the Russians in a particular region having this many people dead, and that's too many people dead, and they can't afford to repatriate them, remember that the amount of missing is probably going to, well, it's certainly enlarge that number. I don't know whether it double, triple it, or whatever. But for the number of people that are dead, think of the number of people that are also dead, but just listed as missing and won't find their way back to, in this case, Bratsk and then Ust-Kut. Quote, we need a larger number of pathological bags or body bags for evacuations. It will take a long time to wait for them to be provided. When leaving for evacuation, they may take the usual number, but in reality, it will turn out that there are more than usual, she wrote on social media. So the problems exist all the way down the chain of the processes of dealing with this war for the Russians. Now, a video has been filmed by a Russian Zala pilot showing an ambush of a Russian BTR-82. So that's by a Russian BTR-82 on 2 Ukrainian AFVs. Now, one of the vehicles managed to escape, but the other, with part of the crew still inside, judging by it trying to escape, was shot at and destroyed by the 30mm gun. Okay, so this seems like 2 Ukrainian AFVs were ambushed by Russian, and one of them escaped, one of them was taken out, and all the people lost inside. However, it seems to have been a friendly fire incident, War Vehicle Tracker later says. Now, this is going quite viral at the moment. Oh, no, it's not. You can find this variously online. This video shows it with, Ukrainians and Russian flags, blah, blah, blah. But actually, it appears to be friendly on friendly fire, surrounded by, this whole area is a burning mess. It's somewhere in Kursk. Oh, it's Ruskaya Konopelka, which is an area that's seeing lots of fighting. It's just a village in the Kursk area. And the Ukrainians are actually having a bit of a hard time there. They're supposed to have lost some people there, although that could come from this video, which is now turns out is Russians firing on Russians. It seems to have been a friendly fire incident between two Russian BMP-3 IFEs and a Russian BMP-2 IFE, which seems to have been following the Ukrainian Kozak MRAP. So there is a Ukrainian Kozak there, sorry. So it seems that there is a Ukrainian vehicle there, and then Russian vehicles, one Russian vehicle maybe following it to try and attack it, is ambushed. That's what's ambushed by the other Russian vehicles, and there's friendly losses there, blue on blue fire. And we have seen this lots. I don't know if I've got it. I've definitely got it coming later. But there are lots of reports of Russians bombing Russians at the moment. In fact, 27 times in one day, I think was the stat. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, so here we have a column of Russian armoured vehicles attempted to assault the positions of the 79th Air Assault Brigade, but was detected by the brigade's aerial reconnaissance while still far from their positions. After precise artillery fire and drone strikes took out the lead vehicle, the Russian forces began to retreat in panic. The Russian assault failed before it could even start, and the retreating infantry was effectively targeted by Ukrainian drones. So the Russians are still attacking in a number of places. Ukraine is still doing a really good job of repelling in certain areas. Places like Pokrovsk, though, are still particularly difficult for the Ukrainians. The Russians are making significant gains there, but of course the Ukrainians are making significant gains in Kursk. The question is, in this game of military chicken, who will capitulate first? Right, Ukrainian HIMARS continue to cause havoc in Kursk region and are operating at an extremely high efficiency. Even Russian sources are reporting its large impact on the battle space. And the Russian military is reporting that a military correspondent, Roman Saponkov, notes a high efficiency of HIMARS systems in Kursk, Ukraine, as well as complete dominance of Ukrainian unmanned systems isolating the battlefield after the destruction of Russian air defense systems. So there's a systematic approach that the Ukrainians are taking. They're degrading the Russian air defenses, then getting Ukrainian air superiority in unmanned, in drones. And that's then leading to good reconnaissance that allows HIMARS to operate incredibly efficiently. He also calls for abandoning meat assaults, but this, as you know, is of no interest to anyone. Brilliant. Real problems for facing the Russians, as according to the Russians, right? These are coming from Russian sources. Russian forces bomb their own villages occupied by Ukraine in the Kursk Oblast. So Russia dropped 27 guided bombs on its own territory since this morning. So actually, that's me misinterpreting that slightly. They are bombing some of their own. We have seen them take out their own vehicles and whatnot various times, and that is happening, too much for the Russians' liking, not enough for the Ukrainians' liking. The idea they're dropping bombs on their own territory, though, is that the Ukrainians have taken that territory and they're dropping those bombs on the Ukrainians there. But the idea is that, I said this in one of my Kursk analyses the other day, is that if you're going to try and battle the Russians, right? If you're going to try and trick them or do whatever, then do it in Russian territory, because everything the Russians do will involve destroying their own infrastructure. Right? If you decide to have a fight with the Russians in Pokrovsk, then you're going to trick each other and you're going to destroy Pokrovsk. So you might as well go and do it somewhere else where there's fewer defenders, fewer fortifications, and indeed, every time the Russians drop a bomb, they're dropping a bomb on, scare quotes, themselves, on their own territory, on their own country. And this is part of the success of Kursk. Right, Ukrainian drone air superiority is a thing, says Trent Zelenko, a thing that could and will happen to Western armies unless they mass deploy a lot of anti-aircraft guns at a level of 4 to every maneuver, artillery engineer, aviation and combat service support truck battalion. In other words, that this new kind of war, this new warfare that we're seeing that is so reliant on drones, we in the West need to react and change our doctrine to support everything with low-tech anti-aircraft guns. In the Glushkovsky district, says this Russian source. The enemy is isolating the combat area following the destruction of the bridges. We'll come to that in a second. They began to hit the pontoons. Obviously, the main reason is the complete control of the sky. The enemy quite effectively organised strikes on our air defence system, as a result of which wing drones are now constantly hovering over the area, identifying pontoon crossings. At the same time, the enemy attacks in the direction of Malaya Lochnia. In general, in the future, if we want to prevent new incursions into our territory, among other activities, it's necessary to organise groups of hunters for Kimazi, who will have at their disposal all the necessary means, from intelligence data on the ground to online video footage from winged drones, and also assigning Iskander's duty crew to them. And this hunt must be carried out continuously. 2 years have passed since the mass use of HIMARS. So that's Kimazi is HIMARS, hunters for HIMARS. So they need to hunt HIMARS. 2 years have passed since the mass use of HIMARS, and a mass hunt for them has not yet been launched, despite the fact that this is the second most effective means of isolating the combat area after FPV drones. The second, because there are many more times drones, the most important targets are allocated for HIMARS. We must stop grinding down assault troops on unnecessary villages on the map and move on to forming a harmonious fighting fist. The invasion of Kursk region shows that the only units formed in battle can fight. The rest are actually incapable of combat. The idea of erasing assaults and recruiting again practically from scratch turns into big problems in places where the enemy was able to beat us tactically, depriving us of numerical advantage. So yeah, we may have the advantage in numbers, but these are poorly trained troops, and we're just sending them to meet assaults and they get attrited. And the Ukrainians have the advantage in drones in the air, and they have HIMARS working, and we have spent 2.5 years not hunting HIMARS, or 2 years since HIMARS came along, not hunting HIMARS and not successfully taking them out. If you think, like I reported recently that one HIMARS was taken out, and I was saying, this is what's going to happen. I'm blown away that's the first HIMARS I've seen taken out in 2 years of fighting. What are the Russians doing to effectively combat these HIMARS that are really, really useful, efficient, and effective themselves? And they just seem to have no answer to the HIMARS. And this is a complaint that is coming from the Russian themselves there. Now, according to military sources, another Russian pontoon crossing over the same river was destroyed, possibly by HIMARS. We've seen one or two already destroyed. One definitely destroyed. I think the second one is HIMARS as well, because I think I've seen footage of that. Anyway, over the past week, Ukrainian forces have mounted an incredibly effective strike campaign to trap and cut Russian forces off in the Glushkovsky district in Kursk Oblast. So that's this river here, and you've got the Ukrainians coming along here from Snagost, and you've got the Ukrainians but the Ukrainian border here, and then blowing some bridges by Tetkino, forcing the Russians maybe further to the east there, and then you've got the Ukrainian-Russian border to the south, which means that the only way to supply or get out of this area is across the same river. 3 bridges have been destroyed, and now 2 pontoons. So 3 pre-war bridges were destroyed or heavily damaged, and 2 pontoon bridges have been destroyed or heavily damaged. So this is so I showed you both those videos, haven't I? Or referenced them, and both of those were taken out, pontoon bridges taken out by HIMARS, it appears, or Gimlet guided multiple launch rocket systems using actually cluster munitions there to take them out. Okay, not only that, but I won't show all of this. There's been a destruction of Russian ammunition and fuel storage facility in Kimburn Spit. This could be part of the shaping of Kimburn Spit. There's been rumours about the Ukrainians possibly advancing along there. It is quite a lot of destruction to that ammunition depot, or it could just be general degradation of the Russian capability of using artillery there, because there's a place called Ochakiv just across the estuary that they hammer by using artillery sat on Kimburn Spit, and that has caused the Ukrainians a lot of bother over time. So it just could be part of just general warfare, or it could be shaping the area ready for an attack on Kimburn Spit. Okay, moving on to distance strikes, and my goodness, there's quite a lot to talk about here. Tonight, there was a big drone attack on a Russian military airfield in Marinovka, Volgograd region. That's 440 kilometers from the front line. Secondary detonations were reported after the strikes. The first strikes were at 2:30 a.m. local time. Explosion on the territory there was seen. There's a big old explosion recorded on camera. That looks like there's already smoke in the air. So that's another big explosion that's taken place there. Could be a secondary detonation from cooking off, or it could be another drone hitting. Some additional footage. I mean, you can go and check it out. Marinovka or Oktyabrsky military airfield on the socials. But this is a really significant strike. Pierre contacted, first thing I read this morning is Pierre saying massive explosions, sort of check this out type thing. Satellite imagery of the airbase prior to the attack shows that there were a whole bunch of aircraft there and quite a lot of infrastructure. Also on the territory were airbase trucks which resemble Shahed launchers. So some people saying not quite sure about what is there in these trucks. Like these made people go, interesting. And if they are Shahed launchers, then that could be significant as a strike. So NASA satellites recorded 3 fires, or 3 areas of fires on the territory of Marinovka airfield. One of them is located on a platform where the airplanes are parked. Another fire broke out in the area where the tanks are located. That's storage tanks, not tanks. So yeah, the firms is already confirming some serious strikes there. MT Anderson says, here are the before images. So this is what he reckons: 14 Su-24s, 15 Su-34s, but he's wanting some confirmation there. What I find more interesting, the 8 semi-trucks, 18 meters in length. What are they carrying? Ammo supplies, Shaheds, so on and so forth. So it could be, and we've seen this recently, is that in these strikes on air bases, the Ukrainians aren't necessarily going for the airframes. They're actually going for the munitions that the airframes carry, or infrastructure there which allows the airframes to be used, right? And if you take out the lubricants and the fuel depots and the ordnance, then how are you going to fly the plane? And it could be that you take out those things and it causes much longer term issues for the Russians than just taking out maybe 3 out of 15 planes. Well, okay, there's 3 planes gone, but you can just use the other 12, move them to another airbase or whatever, not move them to the other airbase, continue to use that airbase because you've only just lost 3 planes. You start taking the infrastructure of that airbase out, and then those planes can't fly their missions because they've got nothing to fire and they've got nothing to fuel their tanks with, etc., etc. So we're possibly seeing a slight change of approach by the Ukrainians. Now, Russia have come out and admitted a fire at the military facility at Volgograd Oblast after a drone strike. A fire broke out at the Russian military facility in Volgograd following a drone attack overnight, according to Governor Andriy Bucharov. Quote, tonight air defenses repelled a drone attack over Volgograd Oblast in the area of Marinovka. Most of the drones were intercepted, the governor claimed. Yeah, not all of them though. Some pretty big fires going off there. The attack follows a pattern of recent Ukrainian strikes on Russian air bases, primarily targeting air-launched ammo warehouses rather than airframes. Similar attacks occurred earlier in Lipetsk, Rostov and Kursk Oblasts, according to Euromaidan Press. So a Russian local comments on Marinovka airbase attack: everything is destroyed. The attack started at 2:30 and has continued to the video recording time in the daylight hours. In the video, drone flyby and distant explosions can be heard. So in other words, it was still appearing to take place in the morning. And the smoke rises from several different points at the base. This is a massive, massive attack. Now, I'm just going to include this because it gives you a sense of what the reaction is to this, because this is a really significant set of explosions, different places on fire. As you can see, 3 points of fire there and lots of smoke. 10 out of 10, this is Ilya Ponomarenko saying 10 out of 10 Dostoevsky moment with a Russian guy witnessing the Marinovka airbase following the Ukrainian drone assault. Quote, and I'll have to euphemize here, or not euphemize, just use a lot of Fs. There is a flying, there it is flying by, F. Effing flying over again, F. It's all effing effed up. Everything, it's effed as F. They're effing bombing it since 2:30 a.m. They're still effing it now. It's a serious tragedy, folks. This is serious stuff. It's all effing on fire, and it's effing smoke, and it's all effing exploding. That's it. The Oktyabrsky Bursky airfield is effing effed as F. That's really something else. And all the new hangars, it's all blown up in the air. F. So interesting there that one, you get that kind of real reaction to what's going on. The idea that everything, there's another explosion going off there, that it's all just blowing up. And the idea also that there are new hangars, he knows that there are new hangars there that have been blown up. And he thinks it's all been blown up. We'll see in the satellite imagery that no doubt will be perused over the coming days. But that is a super significant strike. Then something else that happened last night that I originally only saw on Igor Sushko take with a pinch of salt. Russia, huge fire at Novorossiysk. So Novorossiysk is that now a naval base where the Black Sea Fleet is mainly housed, although they're kind of trying to move it down to Abkhazia, down on the Georgian coast. There's a massive fire there. There was a massive fire there last night. This is the Krasnodar Krai Oblast. And I've not heard much else about this from other of my normal sources. So I went and just searched Novorossiysk. And yeah, large fire broke out in Novorossiysk, Russia, where many key grain and wheat export terminals are located. A brief explainer has been posted elsewhere in a discussion group. Bottom line, talk about market if the markets rally. So the idea is that this is possibly could really affect grain. People are advising short-term selling opportunity, blah blah blah. So this might have an effect on the price of grain. It's significant. So Agent Atesh discovered oh no, sorry, that's not the right one. It's down here. So some more amazing footage tonight. A major fire destroys entertainment venues in Novorossiysk. It's known that there's a bathhouse and other stores have already burned to the ground. Now the fire is spread to the garages and the trampoline centre. The areas of the fire have reached 300 square metres. One victim is reported at the moment. The fire has been localised. The cause of the fire is still unknown. Also, due to the fire, part of Novorossiysk was left without electricity. So, you know, the original one's claiming it's grain and wheat storage, and now we're talking about like main part of the city burning, or you know, main part of, I don't know, some district burning. Just yeah, quite a bit of talk about this on the socials, but we'll have to see what the result is as time goes on. You know, later one says videos of a very large fire claimed to be over now 20,000 square meters in Novorossiysk. No cause has yet been given, so no talk about drones or anything. But there's a massive old fire going on there, or was going on there. We'll have to wait to see more news of that. Right, then we're going to go back to Proletarsk, where, remember yesterday I was talking about how that for the fourth day that had been burning, that big oil depot that the Ukrainians had hit and the Russians cannot control, and they'd sent in their level 9 wizards, and it looks like their spells were ineffective as well, because another fuel tank exploded yesterday. Then another fuel tank exploded last night at the oil depot in Rostov region. In fact, it appears that the explosions are getting stronger and stronger. It's like a sunrise. And Tendar says thoughts and prayers didn't work, in reference to what I was just talking about. And then another exploding fuel tank it's caught fire and exploded, which it's now been burning for 5 days. There's been injuries to emergency services there. It is still going on and on this, and it is definitely an issue for the Russians that will affect, I would have thought of, hugely affect the supply of hydrocarbons. This is supposed to be a depot that supplies the Russian army, so it might have that extra strategic impact. Now, I'm going to go back to my breaking news piece yesterday. Might be a corrective, not really sure. There was this claim that was in the Kiev Independent, among other places, that Ukraine had destroyed 3 planes and then possibly damaged another 5. So one MiG-31, a KI, and 2 Il-76s were destroyed, with 5 other planes or aircraft, possibly including helicopters, being damaged on a second attack of the Savasleika airfield. Now, there was one that took place, I think, on the 13th and 14th night of, and then one further one being claimed on the 16th. Now, I reported that yesterday, along with strikes on Murmansk. We'll come to that. Mark Krutov has done some satellite analysis and says he thinks that no additional damage is visible on August the 21st, high-resolution satellite imagery. So, okay, that's 5 days later. So, you could argue that it's been cleaned up and you won't see damage there to airframes. But satellite imagery from the 21st indicates that no additional damage compared to the 14th strike on the 14th. So you got the original one. So the idea that you've got these sources coming out and saying that there was a further strike doing more damage is possibly called into question. He says it makes me even more skeptical about the sole fact that there was the claim that there was yet another strike on the 16th. So, take that claim of the 16th with a pinch of salt. It might have happened, but you would probably need a bit more evidence to support that. And the second part of my breaking news piece was, and this was definitely happening because there's video evidence of it happening at the time, is that this airfield probably, was it the Alenia or Leshka? I can't remember. Anyway, the military airfield up in the Arctic Circle area, Murmansk, or certainly targets were being sought in that area, 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine. That was happening yesterday. There was footage of an aeroplane type drone, one of these kind of light aircraft drones that had been adapted, being shot down by small arms fire close to close to a military settlement of Vysoky. The drone approached from the south, initially flying the altitude of 1,300 meters, descended to 900 meters before being lost. Drones have been attacking Murmansk region for 4 consecutive days. So I was trying to make the point that not only is this quite incredible that they are flying drones that far, they're getting all that way before they're shot down by small arms fire. It's not good. If you're a Russian, you'd be like, this is not good enough. They should be being shot down within 200 kilometers of the front line, not 2,000 kilometers and being shot down by small arms fire. But it's that we appear to be seeing an uptick in strikes, which is exactly what I've been asking for, which is building up the manufacturing capacity for attack drones. So you can just send drones a lot, often, and send them in ways that overwhelm air defenses so that the Russians are playing whack-a-mole and they're losing. And those moles are coming up and they are laughing at the Russians. We are starting to see possibly a bit of a critical moment where we've got fuel depots being massively hit. We've got last night's strike on the airfield possibly being huge. We've got strikes 2,000 kilometers away. We've got strikes on on Moscow. So now we're starting to hear that, Moscow was targeted yesterday as well, or not last night, the night before. And there were very few bits of information coming out of this, but the Russians claimed they shot down 11 drones or something. Now, Ukraine apparently used 50 drones in a recent attack on Moscow and other regions. So a lot of drones are being used on a regular basis. The Moscow mayor called one of the largest in the city to date. But yeah, Kirilo Budanov has claimed 50 drones being used. This is what we need. We need large scale. And I keep saying that you need to use 50 drones on one target rather than spread those out. Just overwhelm. If you really want to take out a target, just send everything you can at that one target, then move on to the next target and do that on consecutive nights rather than 50 drones spread on 10 targets or 5 drones on each. They're going to be taken down possibly. But there are different arguments for doing each thing. So if you send all 50 drones at one target and they've got really good electronic warfare, then you lose 50 drones. Whereas you send 5 drones at 10 targets, maybe one or two targets will get taken out by those 5 drones on each. So there are arguments either way, but I'd just like to see massive overwhelming of really high value targets such as air bases. And I think we're starting to see that. Now, on the flip side, US Embassy in Ukraine, citing US State Department, has published a statement saying that Russia will intensify efforts to strike civilian infrastructure and government facilities in Ukraine in the coming days. So I think Russia are starting to get a little bit annoyed about having so many Ukrainian successful drone and missile missions. I was talking about how earlier on how the Russians are not using very many missiles at the moment. They are stockpiling, and if they are stockpiling, then I expect a massive missile attack at some point. And it could be that the US intelligence has got hold of some information suggesting that the Russians are going to do this, and that wouldn't surprise me at all. But what is, I think, important to note is that they are still lacking in cruise missiles in general, is my opinion. So if we look at the data, if we look at recent data, I don't know if you can see that, but down there, that's the recent time, and there's no large drone large missile waves of missiles being used against Ukraine in the past, couple of months. And actually, even in the last 6 months, there are no waves of missiles of above 60. This is a problem, I think, for the Russians, although I do surmise that they are stockpiling and you will see a large attack imminently. Okay, going on to other bits and pieces. Yesterday I talked about Putin's doubles, and some people said, look at the ears, and it's really important. The ears are very hard to replicate, and so if one Putin's got the same ears as the other Putin, then it's likely that is the same Putin. It just might be a little bit more Botoxed, or as he's aged, he's getting a lot of treatment, possibly steroids for cancer or Parkinson's or whatever, and that's why he's got a puffy face. Well, it's interesting to note this is two Putins from the same week, right? I can't see the ears there, but are they the same Putin? That is the question. And I don't know. Anyway, I will refer you back to the Putin body double analysis claims done by a Japanese team using facial recognition, artificial intelligence. And they said that, if I get to the stats just down here, there is, I've missed it. There is a difference between one Putin and another Putin had a 53% resemblance. And that first Putin and a third Putin had a 40% resemblance. But then comparing the second and the third Putin only had an 18% resemblance. If I remember correctly. Yeah, 18%. So in other words, it's about a half and a half between 1 and 2 and 1 and 3. But then between 2 and 3, really not recognizable, those two with each other. And so artificial intelligence has done that. I think they've done it. Have they not done it on voice as well? There's another report on the voice. So it does seem like there are doubles being used. Just quite when they are is up for grabs. It certainly seems that there's a behavioural difference between the Putin that goes and hugs lots of people and a Putin that sits at the other end of the table from everyone else. Okay. Several Russian TV stations were forced to temporarily close down broadcasting yesterday. I think, was that today? No, it says today. As Ukraine's military intelligence cyber forces injected a dose of reality onto their regular stream of propaganda. So, Ukrainian intelligence hacked Russian TV channels and showed truth of the war, videos of death and destruction. Ukrainian intelligence sources told RBC Ukraine that cyber specialists attacked the servers of the Russian TV channels. Video from the GOR was shown 3 times in prime time on Pervouralsk TV, Eurasia 360, and Channel 1. and others. As noted, some of the attacked channels are part of the media holding of local oligarch Andrei Komarov. A number of TV channels were forced to stop broadcasting for a long time. Good stuff there. Now, the ISW talks about the Kursk region and what the Russians are doing with regard to stocking Kursk with defensive troops. They are claiming, the ISW Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank, are claiming that Russia is shifting troops from Chasiv Yar to Kursk. Chasiv Yar, a key road and rail network connecting Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, has been a crucial area in Ukraine's front line where heavy fighting was happening. So they are taking troops from different areas. The question is, are they taking them from Pokrovsk and Toretsk and New York, areas where the Russians are making these significant advances, whilst the Russians are being pushed back significantly in Kursk? So there's this game of military chicken. Who will capitulate first? The Ukrainians are having this big PR win, big territorial win inside Russia. And the Russians are having this grinding, attritional kind of set of gains inside Ukraine. Who will break first? Well, the Russians are taking troops from a number of areas. There's a claim from the ISW taken from Chasiv Yar, and that will mean Ukraine will be able to defend Chasiv Yar better. Deep States mentioned that Russia can send reinforcements to Kursk from Krinky down on the Dnipro River, Robotna on the Zaporizhia front, Luhansk in the northeastern front, and Kharkiv on the which we know they're sending them from the Vovchansk area. So that means the Russians will not be able to attack in all those places effectively. Instead of drawing away forces from Pokrovsk and Toretsk, that's what's saying. The last place they're going to draw from will be Pokrovsk and Toretsk, because that's the only area, the area that they're having the most significant effect, the most significant territorial gains. Now, War Monitor here says Russian forces are now transferring airborne troops from Crimea to the Kursk area. We had heard that previously, but actually there's evidence of this too. So it's not just people saying, we're not just having to do trust me, bro. We've got actual visual evidence of this from the markings on the equipment that is coming up from those regions. The 56th Guards Air Assault Regiment on the way from the occupied south in Ukraine, in Crimea, to Kursk. So that's the claim, that they're coming from Crimea is being visually confirmed by the markings on the vehicles. Anyway, this is what is taking place. This is one of the objectives for the Ukrainians doing that. It is succeeding, but what they really want is to draw away forces from Pokrovsk. But it could be that maybe it's leaving holes for the Ukrainians to do localized counterattacks in some of those other areas. I don't know. I don't know whether they have enough capacity to do that, say in Chasiv Yar, where they've just been holding on with white knuckles to some of those areas in Chasiv Yar. If the Russians are pulling out from there to some degree, will the Ukrainians have enough to take some of that area back? Putin refuses, says the Euromaidan press, though, to withdraw troops from Ukraine, sending poorly trained teenage conscripts to defend Kursk against Ukrainian invasion, which sparks limited protests within Russia, according to the Telegraph. So the Daily Telegraph is saying that actually they're much more reliant on taking troops from inside Russia as conscripts. And we heard yesterday, was it, that they're taking some from Siberia, conscripts from these different areas who aren't allowed to be sent abroad to foreign wars, but they can be used technically inside Russia. But these are young people who are not motivated to necessarily join the army. They are forced to through national conscription. And if they lose those troops and sending them into meat assault defenses against the better trained Ukrainian troops that are being used in Kursk, as the Ukrainians are using some fairly decent units there, then it's not going to end well for the Russians. So it's a bit of a bind for Putin. Does he defend it by taking troops from the front line? Okay, he does, but he takes them from where he can, not from where he's having the most success. And he takes them from within Russia, but you lose those troops, you're in trouble. General Lapin of Russia, who's the one that was responsible for attacking into Kharkiv Oblast. So he's the Vovchansk, in charge of those two areas north of Kharkiv, where the Russians did that kind of surprise attack. But he was a poor general who'd had bad rep for previous activity in the war. He's then trying to prove himself up in Kharkiv. He was apparently responsible for the weakening of the defense in the Kursk region shortly before the Ukrainian offensive, according to the Washington Post. So the report states that he dissolved the council responsible for the region's defense a few months before the Ukraine's operation. The article highlights that Lapin's lack of awareness regarding battlefield realities is a common issue with Russia's military leadership, despite knowing that Ukrainian forces were increasing near the border and sending warnings to Moscow. The Kremlin did not take action, dismissing Ukraine's maneuvers as psychological warfare tactics. And now it's coming to bite them on the arse. Now, Kremlin has launched a campaign to justify prioritizing eastern Ukraine over the eastern Ukrainian offensive, so Pokrovsk, Toretsk, New York, over immediately repelling Ukrainians from Kursk, according to sources, says the Euromaidan press. Propaganda aims to normalize the incursion. So there's lots of talk from inside the Kremlin or the network of information sources saying that, hey, this is just normal warfare, really normalizing that incursion, not trying to shout about it saying, oh my god, the Ukrainians have invaded Russia, it's just part of the war, don't worry about it, type thing. So propaganda aims to normalize the incursion, redirect domestic concerns, and maintain confidence in a Russian victory. So that is really interesting there, and that's being reported in the Institute for the Study of War as well. And finally, Russian soldiers, there's again more reports on them being, in this case, tied to, these are refuseniks being handcuffed to trees and being beaten. And this has been happening in the summer, even though that image at the beginning doesn't look like it's from the summer. But the reports are this is just happening. If you don't go into battle, there will you'll get into trouble. Basically, I could read you this very long thread, but the Russians it tells you two things. One, that there are these refuseniks. So what is the reason that people are refusing? A, they don't want to be there. B, when they are there, it sucks and there's poor leadership and they're being sent to their deaths. And then you get the issue of how the Russians treat their soldiers, and is that itself a kind of war crime, or as what I've discussed previously in becoming a refusenik. You have the right to refuse if the treatment you are getting is over and beyond what you should expect in terms of terrible conditions and being tortured for X, Y, and Z. So this shows us several things. Okay, and finally, even if Ukraine was behind blowing up Nord Stream, so there was this report recently, some people have poured a lot of scorn on that report that came out with regard to Ukraine potentially being responsible for the Nord Stream pipeline explosion. I'm ambivalent. I think, there seem to be all these claims and counterclaims, and I haven't had enough time to really go into them. But Petr Pavel, the Czech president, is saying that even if Ukraine was behind blowing up Nord Stream, it was a legitimate target. So he's like, meh, part of war. Czech President Petr Pavel has said that he had no verified information on whether Kyiv was involved in the operation to blow up those pipelines. But, it's a legitimate target. So there you go. Anyway, a long one. There's so much information going on. Thank you for bearing with me. Take care. Speak soon. Toodle pips.